Answer period, I'm going to let you know, we had this mic turned up really loudly because everyone's voice is different. So if you notice you're really loud, just sort of move it away a little.
By the way, before I entertain any questions, I want to publicly thank my wife over here. She has been editing my work now for some time, particularly the shorter pieces, and she worked on this with me. And I don't mean she checked my grammar and my spelling. I mean she helped to point out when the arguments were weak. And if I have made weak arguments, they're my own fault. They certainly aren't my wife's. But I really want to thank her very much for what she's done for me. Okay. Yes,
too bad the talk's not on International Women's Day or something for you there. I have a number of things here. I came in with the idea of asking if you've looked at Susan Faludi's The Terror Dream and looking at the particularity of American and a colonial settler system as having set the stage for the way it seems to me that the culture is susceptible to manipulation. And that's the other prong, I'm sorry to use it,
yeah,
of my question is that you didn't really address, you talked about terrorist jujitsu and this idea of eliciting a reciprocal action.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the idea of manipulation. It seems to me anybody that was watching the way the color codes changed during the late Bush administration, it seemed to me that there's clearly a manipulation of public opinion going on. So those are sort of two things. I can't stop myself from pointing out that I just heard this morning that since you used the IRA example, that Peter King, the guy that's doing the controversial hearings about terrorism in America, was one of the biggest boosters of the IRA and is a personal friend of Jerry Adams. So, yeah, I also managed to confront Peter Bergen on that very issue on the radio on Focus 580 here, and I don't understand why he wants to believe that bin Laden is that naive to think that with the oil prize of the Middle East, that the U.S. would just roll over and go away.
Okay. I can't comment on the first book you mentioned. In regard to manipulation, I obviously don't put it beyond the Bush administration to manipulate. They obviously did. My point is that I think there was something in the American psychology of outrage that was willing to listen to that stuff. I think that we need to be hard on ourselves or hard on the American population and not just on the president. As regards the IRA, I'll just make a comment. You know, there's a sense that somehow popular movements always win. The IRA lost. They had a fight all the way to 1998 to get an agreement that was offered them in 1973. It's an example of the tremendous cost. One of the things I'm looking at in my study in Surrender is the role of time. Violence over time has a burst that makes people committed to continue the violence. It takes a long time for attrition to set in because the first losses are always those who say they will never have died in vain. And then when a lot more have died in vain, then the realization that it ain't going anywhere sets in. Another question. Or comment? Oh, Bergen? I'm mad at Bergen. If you read his earlier book, The Bin Laden I Know, he contradicts what he says in the later books. I read that book because it was precisely concerned about this notion of how is he making a statement. So I read the footnotes. There's nothing in there. Now, look, Bergen's been there, done that. Maybe he's got lots of information that he can't put in the footnotes. But he makes these absolutely categorical statements that bin Laden expected no great response. And he uses that to criticize bin Laden. But when you realize that the Taliban themselves are saying, wait a minute, we've just been informed of the Americans that hell is coming if you do anything else big, so much to the point that Mullah Omar, the head of the Taliban, goes to him and says, you got to leave. Well, he's won over by bin Laden in that interchange finally. But how could bin Laden not expect something to come? Most people looking at this have argued that he did expect this and that we got caught in a trap. I'll say it's out there. I think in Iraq we definitely fell into a trap of our own making. Okay, yes.
Given, excuse me, I have the microphone.
Oh.
Given that we're looking at both sides, I'm getting to the point where I feel that both sides are equally wrong. What should be done at this point?
Okay. Can I tell you what I don't think should be done? I have a real problem with Huntington's argument that we're in this big clash of civilizations. It turns into an inescapable inevitability what is in fact a self-fulfilling prophecy. Okay? I don't think that we need to make these categorical statements that we're automatically going to be at war with one another. In an earlier, longer version of this talk, which I'm sure you're all glad you didn't have to sit through, one of my conclusions is that I'm much more encouraged by looking at comparative outrage than I am at fundamental differences in civilization. Because I think outrage can be solved by doing things, whereas this theory of a clash of civilization is about being. And it's hard to change your being, but you can change the things you do. I think we're in a learning curve. You listen to people who were policymakers back in 2001, and they're beginning to say things like, well, we overreacted, we did this too much, we did that too much. I think we're coming to grips with the implications of our own outrage. I actually think that in most cases of terrorism, short of nuclear terrorism, it's better not to do anything than to do the wrong thing. You know, these people are weak. That's why they do that stuff. It's not because they're strong. They're doing it to try to get us to do the wrong thing. Forget about the fear. Worry about your own outrage. And that may help us. Frankly, I've been impressed with the way bin Laden's reacted to what's been going on. Bin Laden, oh, please, excuse me. Oh, no, Obama has reacted. I'm not that group. I'm not that group. The way Obama has reacted to North Africa. Because I think he's been very sensible about not doing things, about letting things, you know, work themselves out. Well, what gives me any faith in the Obama administration of being able not to do the wrong thing? I think they avoided up to now at least not doing the wrong thing. Very iffy about Libya, I will give you that. But those who say that creating a no-fly zone or any kind of intervention is far more complicated to think are absolutely right. You know, there's very few truths in military history, and I am a military historian. But one thing I will proclaim from the rooftops, it's